I was cast out by my daughter for daring to tell the truth about her husband. Now, from my deathbed, this is my final chance to make her see it. My dears, this is a sad story, but I have to share it. Maybe it will help someone and forgive their children. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any stories in the future. And I'm very interested to know where you watch me from. Please write in the comments. Now let's begin our sad but true story.
My name is Eleanor, and I am dying. The doctors use gentle words like palliative care and making you comfortable, but I've lived 68 years on this earth, and I know a final chapter when I see one. The cancer that started as a whisper in my bones is now a relentless roar, and my time is measured in weeks, maybe months if I'm lucky. But the physical pain is nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the hollow ache in my heart where my daughter used to be, my Chloe. The one person I want to see most in this world, the person who now sees me as a monster. She hates me because I dared to tell her the truth about the man she married. And this story, the one I'm dictating into this little tape recorder for her to find when I'm gone, this is my last chance to set the record straight. It's my final, heartbreaking, I told you so.
You might think that sounds vindictive. Perhaps it is. But when you hear what I saw, what I knew, and how she chose his glittering lies over my lifetime of love, you might understand. You need to understand how we got here, to this quiet, sterile hospice room where the only visitors I have are nurses and ghosts. It all started with a perfect man. His name was Richard, and he was, by all accounts, the perfect husband for my Chloe. He was a successful financial consultant, handsome, charming, and utterly devoted to her. He'd bring me flowers, call me mom, and praise my cooking. He remembered my birthday, fixed my leaky faucet, and listened with rapt attention when I told old family stories. He was everything a mother could wish for her daughter. And my intuition, that quiet, insistent voice that had guided me through 60-plus years of life, screamed from day one that he was a complete and utter fraud. It wasn't anything I could put my finger on at first, just a flicker in his eyes when he thought no one was looking, a smile that was a little too polished, a little too practiced. The way his stories about his past were always grand but slightly vague, lacking the small, messy details of a real life. Chloe, who had always been a romantic, a girl who wanted to believe in fairy tales, was completely besotted. She saw a prince, I saw a performance. "Mama, you're just being cynical," she'd laugh when I'd gently probe. "You just think no one is good enough for your little girl." And because I loved her, because I wanted her to be happy so desperately, I tried to silence that nagging voice. I tried to believe I was wrong. I started spying, as she later called it. I don't see it that way. I call it motherly concern. I started paying attention. When Richard said he was working late on a big merger, I'd noticed on social media that his company had no such merger announced. When he talked about a business trip to Chicago, a casual call to the hotel he claimed to be staying at would reveal they had no guest by that name. They were small lies, easily explained away if you wanted to believe. A confidential deal, a last-minute change of plans. Chloe always had an excuse for him. The first concrete proof, the thing I couldn't ignore, came about a year into their marriage. I had stopped by their house to drop off some fresh vegetables from my garden. They thought I was coming later in the day. As I approached the front door, I heard voices from the open living room window, angry voices, his and a woman's, not Chloe's.
"You can't keep putting me off, Richard," the woman was saying, her voice sharp and demanding. "You promised me the money last week. My son needs those braces." "And you'll get it. Just be patient." Richard's voice was a low, angry hiss, all the polished charm gone. "She's getting suspicious. Her mother is always sniffing around. I have to be careful. Just give me another month." I stood there, frozen behind the azalea bushes, my heart pounding. I didn't need to hear any more. It was clear. He had another life, another family, another woman he was making promises to. My daughter was not his princess. She was his cover. That evening, I made the terrible decision to tell her. I sat her down in my living room, my heart aching for the pain I was about to inflict. I told her, calmly and factually, what I had heard. She didn't believe me. "You're making it up, Mom," she cried, her face flushing with anger. "You overheard a TV show. You misunderstood. You've always hated Richard. You've always been looking for something to tear us apart." "Chloe, honey, I heard his voice." "No, I won't listen to this. You're a bitter, lonely woman, and you can't stand to see me happy." The words were like stones, each one striking me in the heart. She chose him. So completely, so blindly. She looked at me not as her mother, who loved her, but as an enemy to her happiness. The fight was terrible. It ended with her storming out, screaming that she never wanted to see me again if I couldn't support her marriage. That was the beginning of the end. Our relationship, once so close, became a minefield of strained silences and polite evasions. She stopped visiting. Her calls became brief and cold. She told me to stop my spying and my manipulations. She told me I needed help. And then came my diagnosis. When I told them I had cancer, their reaction was muted. There was concern, yes, but it was overshadowed by a sense of weary obligation. My illness, my needs, became another burden on her perfect life with her perfect husband. The rift between us widened into a chasm. The day she told me she couldn't handle the stress of my care anymore, that her own life and marriage had to come first, was the day I truly lost her. She didn't hate me with the fiery passion anymore. She just erased me, and that was so much worse. So now I lie here, and I wait, and I write down this truth. The truth I tried to give her out of love, a truth she rejected out of a loyalty she gave to the wrong man. This concession, this story, is all I have left to give her. It is my final, heartbreaking, "I told you so."
The hospice room has a window that looks out onto a small manicured garden. It's lovely, I suppose. The nurses are kind. But it's a cage, a soft, quiet, beige cage where I'm meant to wait for the end. But I am not waiting. I am working. My weapon is not a sword, but a small digital voice recorder. My battle is not for my life, but for the truth. And my final act on this earth will be to leave behind a confession that is also an indictment. My final, heartbreaking, "I told you so." Every day, I speak into this little machine. I tell it my story. I tell it about Richard. I try to be fair, to be precise. I try to explain how a wolf managed to convince my lamb that he was a gentle shepherd and that I, her mother, was the real predator. It began with money, as it so often does. Richard was a financial consultant, and he dripped with the kind of smooth confidence that makes people trust him instantly. After Chloe married him, he began to help her with her finances. My daughter, a smart girl, but one who always found numbers tedious, was grateful. She handed over control of her savings, her inheritance from her father, everything. "He's so much better at this stuff, Mom," she'd say happily. Then I started noticing things. Chloe, who had always been so generous,
suddenly became frugal, but only with me. A lunch date would be canceled because she was saving for a big investment. Her usual Christmas gift to me, always something thoughtful and lovely, was replaced by a generic box of chocolates. At the same time, I'd see pictures of her on social media with a new designer handbag or on a weekend trip to a fancy resort with Richard. When I gently questioned it, she would get defensive. "Richard is teaching me to be smart with money, Mom. You just don't understand." He was teaching her something, all right, but it wasn't how to be smart. It was how to be selfish. He was isolating her financially, making her feel that any money spent on me, her mother, was a frivolous expense, a drain on their future. He framed my very existence as a financial liability. Then came the emotional manipulation. It was masterful in its cruelty. He never criticized me to my face. To me, he was all charm and deference, but to Chloe in private, he would twist my every action into something sinister. I'd call to check on her if she had a cold. "Your mother is so controlling, darling. She doesn't trust you to take care of yourself." I'd bring over a home-cooked meal. "She's trying to make me look bad, to show that she's the better caregiver. It's a power play, can't you see?" I'd offer advice based on my own life experience. "She's stuck in the past, Chloe. She doesn't want you to be more successful or happier than she was." He was a sculptor, and my daughter's mind was his clay. He reshaped her perception of me, transforming me from a loving mother into a jealous, manipulative, controlling monster. And Chloe, so in love, so desperate for his approval, began to believe him. Our conversations became strained, full of her defensive retorts and my bewildered pain. And all the while, I kept seeing the small signs of his own deceit. The late-night phone calls he'd take in the other room, his voice a low whisper. The lipstick stain on his collar that he tried to pass off as a smudge from a clumsy colleague. The florist receipt I found in his car for a bouquet of expensive roses that were most certainly not for my daughter. That was when I decided to follow him. It felt like a terrible violation, a betrayal of my own principles. But my daughter's happiness, her very soul, was at stake. I had to know the truth for sure before I could present it to her. I followed him from his office one afternoon. He didn't go home. He went to a quiet, expensive restaurant downtown. And there, at a secluded corner table, he met a woman. A beautiful, younger woman. And the way he looked at her, the way he touched her hand across the table, it was not the look of a business meeting. It was the look of an intimate, long-standing affair. That was the proof I needed. That was the truth I had to tell Chloe, and that was the day she hated me for it. My truth could not compete with his lies. My lifetime of love was no match for his few years of practiced deception. She chose to believe him when he said the woman was a distraught client he was mentoring. She chose to believe him when he said I was a paranoid, lonely old woman trying to ruin their happiness. She chose him, and she cast me out of her life. A knock on my hospice room door pulls me from my reverie. It's my friend Martha, a dear woman from my church. Her face is full of a sad, reluctant worry. "Ernest, honey, I just spoke to my niece. She's a lawyer, a divorce lawyer." My heart gives a slow, painful thud. "She has a new client," Martha continues, her grip tightening on my hand. "A young woman, heartbroken, devastated. Her husband, a man named Richard, has apparently been cheating on her for years, and has just drained their joint bank accounts and left her with nothing. Honey, the client, it's Chloe.
Martha squeezed my hand, her eyes full of a shared sorrow. The lawyer said Chloe is devastated, completely heartbroken. Apparently, she found definitive proof, the same way you did. A single hot tear escaped my eye and traced a path down my weathered cheek. Vindication. It was a cold, bitter comfort. I had been right. I had known from the very beginning that he was a snake. I had tried to save her, and for that, I had lost her. And now she was learning the truth in the most brutal way possible, and I wasn't there to hold her, to comfort her, to help her pick up the pieces. All because of her stubborn pride and his masterful lies. Does she... I started, my voice a croak. Does she know that I know? Martha shook her head. I don't think so, Eleanor. My niece didn't mention you. It seems Chloe is trying to handle this on her own for now. She's probably too ashamed to face you. Too ashamed. Yes, that sounded right. My daughter, so full of pride and defiance, would rather suffer alone than admit her mother had been right all along. After Martha left, a new kind of turmoil filled my quiet hospice room. Before, there was a strange peace in my righteous anger, a clarity in my tragic story. Now, everything was complicated again. The mother in me, the part of my heart that had never stopped loving her, ached to go to her, to hold her, to tell her it would be all right. But the woman she had rejected, the woman whose love she called manipulation, was proud and deeply, deeply wounded. She had cast me out. The next move had to be hers. And it came 3 days later. It wasn't a phone call. It was a letter. A simple, white envelope slipped under my door by one of the nurses, with a single word on the front. Mama. I opened it, my hands trembling. The letter was short, the handwriting shaky, stained with what I knew were teardrops. Mama, it read. Mama, you were right. You were right about everything. I was a fool, so blind and so stupid, and I am so, so sorry. I'm sorry for what I said to you, for how I treated you, for choosing him over you. I know your health isn't good. If you could ever find it in your heart to see me, I would like to ask for your forgiveness in person. I will be outside your hospice at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. If you don't come to the window, I will understand, and I will never bother you again. I love you. Chloe. I read the letter a dozen times, the words blurring through my tears. She was sorry. She knew. She wanted to see me. Everything I had longed to hear for the past year. But it was all tangled up with the bitter reality of my situation. My time was running out. Was one last meeting enough to heal such a deep wound? Or would it just open it up all over again? That night, I spoke into my little recorder, my voice thick with emotion. I told the recorder about Chloe's letter, about the impossible choice I now faced, to see her and risk the heartbreak of a too-late reconciliation, or to refuse and die with this chasm between us forever. By morning, I had made my decision. At 10 a.m., I asked the nurse to wheel my chair to the window of my room, which overlooked the entrance garden, and I waited. A few minutes later, a taxi pulled up, and she got out. My Chloe. She looked thin, pale, her usual vibrant confidence gone, replaced by a heartbreaking fragility. She stood on the sidewalk, clutching her purse,
and looked up at my window, her face a mask of hope and terror. Our eyes met across the distance. I saw the shame, the regret, the love in her gaze. And she, I suppose, saw the same in mine. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock on my door. I took a deep breath. "Come in." She stood in the doorway, a ghost of the daughter I remembered. Then she rushed to my side, falling to her knees, burying her face in my lap, her body shaking with sobs. "Mama, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," she wept over and over. I just stroked her hair, my own tears falling silently onto her bowed head. There were no words, just the shared, agonizing language of grief and regret. We talked for hours. She told me everything, how she'd found the other woman's emails, the secret credit card bills, the plane tickets to romantic getaways he'd taken while telling Chloe he was on business trips. The web of lies was even more extensive, more audacious than I had known. He hadn't just cheated. He had lived a complete double life. And I, in turn, told her everything. About my first suspicions, about following him, about the pain of her choosing his lies over my truth. "Why didn't you believe me, baby girl?" I asked her softly. "Because I didn't want to. Because believing you meant admitting my perfect fairy tale was a lie. It meant admitting I was a fool. And I loved him so much. I was so afraid of losing him, I was willing to lose you instead. And it was the stupidest, most terrible mistake of my life." The truth, finally, lay bare between us. It was ugly and it was painful, but it was real. Our relationship had been shattered, but here in this sterile hospice room, amidst the ruins, we were finally, carefully, beginning to pick up the pieces.
The days that followed Chloe's return were like a gift I never thought I'd receive. The sterile, quiet hospice room, once a lonely waiting area for death, became a sanctuary of reconciliation. She was there every day, from morning until the nurses gently shooed her out at night. She brought me small comforts, a soft cashmere blanket to replace the scratchy hospice issue one, a thermos of my favorite jasmine tea, a small speaker to play the old jazz records we both loved. But the greatest comfort was simply her presence, her hand in mine, her head resting on the edge of my bed as she read to me, the easy, familiar rhythm of her breathing as she sometimes dozed in the armchair. We talked. We talked for hours, for days. We didn't just talk about the ugly past with Richard. We talked about everything. We excavated our shared history, polishing old memories until they shone again. We spoke of her childhood, of her father, of my own dreams when I was her age. It was a frantic, desperate attempt to cram a lifetime of lost conversations into the handful of weeks I had left. There was pain in it, of course, a constant aching undercurrent of what if? What if she had listened sooner? What if I had been more forceful? What if Richard had never existed? But we didn't let the what-ifs consume us. We focused on the right now. Chloe's own healing was a miracle to witness. Freed from Richard's gaslighting and manipulation, the daughter I remembered began to reemerge, strong, intelligent, compassionate. She finalized her divorce with a speed and ferocity that would have made me proud, her lawyer using the evidence of his multiple affairs and financial deceit to leave him with nothing but his own lies. She didn't want his money. She wanted her freedom. And she got it. She found a new apartment, a small, sunny place of her own. She started making plans for her future, talking about going back to school to get her master's degree. The light was returning to her eyes. And seeing that light, knowing she'd be okay, knowing she'd be more than okay, was the greatest peace my heart could know.
One afternoon, when I was feeling particularly weak, I knew it was time. "Chloe, baby," I whispered, my voice thin. "The little tape recorder on the nightstand, could you get it for me?" She looked at it confused. "This old thing? I thought you were just dictating notes for the nurses." "No, honey," I said, managing a weak smile. "It's for you. It's my story. The one I started telling when I thought I'd never get to speak to you again. It's my final I told you so. But not the angry kind, the loving kind. I want you to have it. I want you to listen to it when I'm gone. So you'll always know. You'll always know the truth of my heart." She took the recorder, her hands trembling, her eyes filling with tears. "Mama." "It's all right, baby girl," I said, my own vision blurring. "It's all in there. Everything I couldn't say. My love, my anger, my foolishness, my pride. It's my legacy to you. Not money, not a house, just the truth." She clutched the small device to her chest as if it were the most precious jewel in the world. In that moment, I knew she understood. The days grew shorter, my breaths more shallow. Chloe was with me constantly, sleeping on a cot in my room, holding my hand through the long, painful nights. We didn't talk as much anymore. There wasn't much left to say. We just were. Together. A mother and daughter making up for lost time at the very edge of eternity. She would sometimes play the tapes quietly while I dozed, and I'd hear my own voice filling the room, telling stories of her past, of my love, of my fears for her. It was a strange, disembodying experience, but also a deeply comforting one. My story would live on. The truth would remain. One evening, I woke from a fitful sleep. The room was dark, save for the soft glow of a nightlight. Chloe was asleep in the armchair, her face peaceful for once. I watched her for a long time, my heart overflowing with a love so vast, so profound, it almost erased all the pain. I had lost her once because I had dared to tell the truth. But now, in the final moments of my life, the truth had brought me back to me. And as I lay there, my own breathing growing softer, I realized that this, right here, was the most I could have ever hoped for. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a real one. Messy, painful, tragic, but real. And it was enough. My final "I told you so" wasn't a word of vengeance. It was this quiet moment of peace. This final, precious, heartbreaking gift of being with my daughter as I prepared to leave her forever.
The concept of time becomes fluid when you know you have so little of it left. The days in my hospice room blurred into a single, precious, continuous moment with my daughter. Chloe became my anchor to this world, and I suppose, became her bridge to understanding the past. We didn't waste a single second on anger anymore. There was no time. All we had was now, and the quiet, urgent work of healing a lifetime of wounds in a handful of weeks. She read to me from my favorite books of poetry. We listened to old jazz records, my hand beating a weak rhythm on the blanket, her foot tapping along. We looked through old photo albums, and this time we both smiled at the pictures of me and my ridiculous 70s outfits. The pain was still there, a ghost in the room, but it no longer had power over us. We had named it, faced it, and in so doing had robbed it of its ability to haunt us. She cared for me with a tenderness that was both beautiful and heartbreaking to watch. She learned how to adjust my pillows, how to administer my medication, how to simply sit in the quiet with me, her presence a comforting warmth. She was finally giving me the care she had refused me before, and I was finally in a place where I could accept it, not as a duty, but as a final, profound act of love. My final "I told you so" was never spoken aloud. It didn't need to be. It was in the stories she listened to on my little tape recorder, in the truths she finally allowed herself to see.
My confession became her inheritance. "He's gone, Mama," she told me one afternoon, her voice quiet but firm. I mean, really gone. I served him with the final divorce papers. I took back my maiden name. He's just a sad chapter in a book I'm closing. I saw the strength in her eyes, the resilience I always knew she possessed, now finally unlocked. She had been through the fire of his deceit, and she had emerged not broken, but forged into something stronger. She had learned the lesson I had so desperately, so clumsily tried to teach her, and that was all the vindication I ever needed. My passing, when it came, was peaceful. It was late at night, with the scent of jasmine from the garden drifting in through the open window. Chloe was holding my hand, her head resting on the edge of my bed, just as it had been for so many nights. I felt the last of my strength ebbing away, the world softening at the edges. I squeezed her hand one last time. "I love you, baby girl," I whispered. "I love you more, Mama," she whispered back, her tears falling onto my hand. And then I let go. My confession could have ended there, but a mother's story, I think, never truly ends with her. It lives on in the life of her child. I like to imagine I can see her now, see the woman she became. I see her at my funeral, standing tall and strong, delivering a eulogy that spoke not just of my life, but of the hard-won lessons of love, truth, and forgiveness. She didn't shy away from our painful history. She owned it, using it as a testament to the resilience of the human heart. I see her a few months later, selling the house she had once shared with Richard, using the money not for frivolous things, but to fund her master's degree she had put on hold for him. She studied counseling, specializing in helping women escape manipulative and emotionally abusive relationships. And I see her with my recorder. It sits on her desk, a small black object holding the last of my voice. She doesn't listen to it often, but sometimes, on a difficult day, when she feels her own resolve waver, she presses play. She listens to my story, to my pain, to my unwavering love for her, and she finds her own strength again. The truth I left behind became her shield, her guide. It was a painful inheritance, to be sure, but a powerful one. It was the final act of a mother protecting her child even from beyond the grave. The last thing I see is Chloe. A few years from now, she's happy, truly, deeply happy. She has a partner, a good man, a kind man, who looks at her with adoration and, more importantly, with respect. She has her work, her purpose, helping others find the path she was so painfully forced to walk. She is sitting on her own porch, a cup of tea in her hand, watching her own daughter play in a garden filled with azaleas, and she is telling her daughter a story about a grandmother she never met, a story about a fierce, complicated love, a story about the terrible, beautiful, and ultimately healing power of the truth. My story. And in that moment, I know, with a peace that is absolute and eternal, that I didn't lose my daughter at all. I just had to leave her for a little while so she could finally find her way back, not just to me, but to herself.